Lionel Richie collapsed on stage. On the night of June 24, 2026, 10,000 people filed into the Grand Casino Arena in St. Paul, Minnesota, expecting an ordinary opening night. What they got instead was the moment an entire tour started to wobble. Lionoll Richie, 77 years old, Commodores frontman, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, Motown legend who has sold over 125 million albums worldwide, and the current judge on American Idol alongside Luke Bryan since Katy Perry's departure in season 22. The man whose voice has been playing in the background of American life for 50 years was about 9 songs into his set. He was performing Dancing on the Ceiling, one of the most relentlessly upbeat songs in his catalog. And in the middle of it, he stopped. He sat down on a step at the front of the stage, and he told the crowd something he said he had never told a crowd before. He was dizzy. What happened over the next 40 minutes, the seated piano number, the unannounced intermission that never ended, the saxophone player who finally walked out to deliver the news nobody wanted, turned a concert into a question, and that question has been hanging over 26 tour dates ever since. Tonight, June 30th, that question gets its first real answer. Because tonight, in Pittsburgh, Lionel Richie is supposed to walk back onto a stage. So let's do this carefully. Let's separate what actually happened from what people online have decided happened. Let's look at what his own team has said, what they have very deliberately not said, and what a return or another postponement would tell us about where this tour and this man's health actually stand. This is the truth about Lionel Richie's collapse, his recovery, and the night everything gets tested. Start with the timeline because the details matter more than the rumors. It was the first night of the Sing a Song All Night Long tour, a co-headlining run with Earth, Wind and Fire, featuring founding members Philip Bailey and Verdine White, that had been announced back in January. 26 dates, a summer-long victory lap for 2 of the most beloved acts of their era. Opening night was always going to carry a little extra weight, and by all accounts the show started exactly the way you would want it to. Then, roughly 55 minutes in, something shifted. According to the Minnesota Star-Tribune, Richie was performing Dancing on the Ceiling when he lowered himself onto a step on the stage. He explained to the audience that he was feeling dizzy, and he made a point of saying he had never performed that song sitting down before. He kept his humor about it. He told the crowd, in his words, that when you are feeling dizzy, you sit yourself down. The arena laughed. At that moment, most people in the building still thought they were watching a legend ad-lib through a rough patch. He moved to a grand piano. Seated, he delivered 3 Times a Lady, one of the most tender songs he has ever written. And then he stood and he announced an intermission and he walked off. Here is where the night turned. The intermission did not end. 15 minutes after Richie left, his band left too. The crowd waited. They kept waiting. Reporting from the scene says it was close to 40 minutes before anyone in an official capacity addressed the arena. When someone finally did, it was not a tour manager and it was not Richie himself. It was the saxophone player Dino Soldo, who walked back out and told the crowd the simple, deflating truth. Lionel was not feeling well. He would not be able to continue. More information, Soldo said, would be available. That was it. 10,000 people went home from an opening night that ended on a step and a piano bench. And then came the detail that escalated the whole story. A public information officer with the St. Paul Fire Department confirmed to Fox News Digital that an adult man was transported from the Grand Casino Arena late that night to a local hospital by St. Paul Fire EMS. The department did not narrate anyone's private medical information. But the timing and the context are what turned a rough night into a genuine health scare. So that is the event. A dizzy spell, 2 songs performed sitting down, an intermission that became a cancellation and a transport to the hospital. Every piece of that is documented. None of it is rumor. Now the part where most coverage of this story goes off the rails, because the gap between what is confirmed and what is being claimed online is enormous, and an honest breakdown has to live inside that gap. Here is what is actually on the record. 1. Earth, Wind and Fire's drummer John Paris told the Minnesota Star-Tribune that Richie was, in his words, a little dehydrated, while openly admitting he did not know Richie's official status. That is a bandmate's impression, not a medical finding. Treat it as exactly that. 2. Live Nation, in its official statement, said Richie was acting under the advisement of doctors to rest and return to full health. So we know physicians were involved, and we know the guidance was rest. 3. No official diagnosis has been released. None. As of the most recent reporting, Richie's representatives have not specified what caused the dizziness, and outlets that reached out for comment have noted they did not receive responses elaborating beyond the rest and recover language. That is the entire confirmed picture. Dehydration as an offhand guess from a colleague. Doctors advising rest. No stated diagnosis. Common causes of stage dizziness in an arena setting include dehydration, vertigo, heat exhaustion, and the compounding physical exertion of sustained performance under intense stage lighting heat. But without an official medical finding, we are not going to attach any of those to Richie specifically. Everything beyond what is confirmed, and there is a lot of it floating around, is speculation. And this is where being 77 years old does something cruel to public perception. It invites people to fill the silence with the worst-case version. The honest analytical move is to refuse to do that. We are not going to tell you what was wrong with Lionoll Richie because Lionoll Richie has not told us, and neither has anyone with the standing to know. What we can responsibly do is look at the context, his age, his schedule, the things he himself has chosen to share publicly about his health, and ask what a careful person should reasonably take away. That is different from diagnosing him, and that difference is the whole point. Consider what was actually being asked of his body that night. This was night 1 of 26. The very first show after weeks of what any tour requires. Rehearsals, travel, production runs, the adrenaline and exhaustion of getting a massive stage operation off the ground. Richie himself acknowledged that machinery. In an Instagram story before the show, he thanked his band and crew for the long hours and the dedication it took to get the tour ready, and signed off with St. Paul, Here We Come. That is a man who knew exactly how much labor was sitting behind the curtain. Now layer on the physical reality. A 2-hour-plus arena performance is an athletic event. Intense stage lighting heat, sustained singing, the physical exertion of holding a room of 10,000 people. People in their 20s get lightheaded doing this. Richie is 77, on opening night, after the most demanding stretch of pre-production a tour has. And here is the thing that should reframe how you read the dizziness. By most accounts, Lionoll Richie has been in generally good health. This is not a man with a long public record of collapsing on stage. According to TV Insider's rundown of his health history, he has dealt with conditions over the years like anyone his age, but he has largely kept performing at a high level. He has been candid about some of it himself. In his 2025 memoir, he disclosed an ADHD diagnosis and wrote openly about a lifetime of restlessness and sensory overload. He has in the past dealt with vocal and throat issues that come with 50 years of singing for a living. None of that is a secret he is hiding. It is a record he has, in large part, volunteered. This is also a man with a career that spans the full arc of American popular music. From his Motown-era roots with the Commodores, to writing Lady for Kenny Rogers, to recording Endless Love with Diana Ross, to co-writing We Are the World alongside Michael Jackson, one of the most streamed charitable recordings in history. Richie has spent 50 years earning the kind of legacy that does not dissolve overnight. He has also been a father in the public eye. His daughter Nicole Richie has grown up alongside his career, and their family story has been as much a part of his public identity as any album. That context matters, not as tabloid material, but because it tells you who this man is outside of a stage. Someone deeply connected to people and to purpose. So the responsible read is not the legend is falling apart. The responsible read is narrower and more human. A 77-year-old man pushed his body through opening night of a grueling tour. Something went wrong enough to require rest and a hospital trip, and his doctors hit pause. That is serious. It is worth taking seriously. But it is not on the available evidence a death watch, no matter how the internet wants to frame it. When a tour of this size pauses, it is never just a personal matter. It is a logistical and financial event, and the way it was handled tells you something. Within days, 2 shows came off the board. The Friday, June 26th date in Chicago at the United Center, and the Saturday, June 27th date in Columbus, Ohio, both postponed. Live Nation's statement framed it cleanly. Under doctors' advisement to rest and return to full health, Richie was pushing the shows, and it carried an emotional note that has become the headline of this whole chapter. Richie, the Live Nation's statement said, was heartbroken to postpone, and could not wait to be back performing for his fans. Rescheduled dates, it added, would be announced soon. Pay attention to the word choice, because in tour communications the wording is engineered. They said postponed, not canceled. Postponed means the shows still exist, they are simply moved. That is a deliberate signal of confidence, a message to ticket holders, to venues, and to the algorithm of public worry that this is a pause, not an ending. They also gave a specific return target rather than leaving it open-ended, which is the opposite of what teams do when they are bracing for a long absence. But do not let the polish hide the stakes. A postponed arena show is an expensive thing. You have a venue booked, a crew on payroll, ticketing systems to unwind, refunds and reschedules to manage, and a co-headliner in Earth, Wind & Fire, with Philip Bailey and Verdine White and the rest of that band, whose own schedule is now tangled up in someone else's recovery timeline. Every paused date sends a ripple through that machine. The fact that Live Nation moved quickly and spoke confidently does not make the pressure disappear. It just means they are managing it the way professionals manage it, with reassurance on the outside and a lot of frantic recalculation on the inside. And underneath all of it sits the only variable that actually matters, the one no statement can control. Whether a 77-year-old man's body cooperates on a timeline, a calendar already printed. Which brings us to Pittsburgh. Tonight, June 30th, Richie and Earth, Wind & Fire are scheduled to return to the stage at PPG Paints Arena. After the dizzy spell, after the hospital, after the 2 postponed shows, this is the first time he steps back into the exact environment that pushed him over the edge 6 nights ago. That is what makes tonight more than just another tour date. It is the test of whether the rest worked, and the stakes ladder out well past this one arena. This is a tour with real runway left. From here, the schedule is supposed to roll through major markets: New York, Atlanta, Los Angeles, with 2 Canadian stops coming fast on the heels of tonight. Toronto on July 4th, Montreal on July 5th. The whole thing is built to wrap at the Moody Center in Austin, Texas on August 14th. So Pittsburgh is not the finish line. It is the gate everything else has to pass through. If tonight goes well, the rest of that calendar gets its confidence back. If it does not, every date after it turns into a question mark. There is also a quieter test happening tonight, and it is about trust. 10,000 people in St. Paul watched their show dissolve into a 40-minute wait and a saxophone player's apology. Fans across a dozen more cities are holding tickets and watching the news. A clean, full Pittsburgh show does something no press statement can do. It proves the recovery rather than promising it. That is the difference between a story that closes and a story that keeps spiraling. So here is where we land before the verdict. We know what happened. We know what his team has said and pointedly not said. We know the schedule that depends on his body holding up. What we do not yet know is the one thing tonight is about to tell us. And tonight he answered it. By taking the stage in Pittsburgh and getting through the show, Lionoll Richie did the only thing that could actually quiet 6 days of speculation. Not a statement, not a Live Nation spokesperson. The performance itself. A 77-year-old man walked back into the exact setting that knocked him down and finished what he started. And that is worth more than every reassurance Live Nation could have written. It does not erase the scare. The smart takeaway from the last week is not that everything is suddenly fine forever. It is that the rest worked. The doctor's caution did its job. And a man who has been doing this for half a century knew the difference between a setback and a stopping point. The dizzy spell in St. Paul was real. So was the recovery. What comes next is the part worth watching with a little grace. Toronto on July 4th. Montreal on July 5th. The long road to the Moody Center in Austin on August 14th. Every one of those dates now sits on a foundation that includes one very important data point. That when his body told him to stop, he listened. And when it was ready, he came back. That is not weakness. At 77, that is exactly how you keep the music going. Lionoll Richie has spent 50 years being the soundtrack. Tonight he reminded everyone he is not finished writing it. If you want the honest version of these stories, the facts, the context, and none of the invented drama, this is the channel for it. Subscribe and we will keep following this tour and this legend all the way to Austin.